Welcome back. I'm Kim Bailey, she's Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec. Today we're continuing our discussion with Trish Nicklin. This is part 2, and we're going to talk about transformation in organisations.
So tell me, how would you go about then going in an organisation to help them, for example?
Yes.
This is your mission now.
So
It has been within and now as a business. Where do you start? What do you do?
I can only go in and help if they recognise that they need it. So that there's already got to be quite an organic shift. Otherwise, sort of banging on doors and no one's going to be interested. Our chairman of the Australian Transformation and Turnaround Association often refers to dinosaurs going off the edge of the cliff. So what we can see is that organisations are either starting to realise they've got to do something and they're running out there and looking for help. What I find is that they're going to the large consulting firms and sort of then going through these really big programs, that the ultimate end of the program is not delivering them more young people coming in. They might get more graduates, but the people aren't staying, which is, they're not innovating. When they start to wake up and you get somebody, what I find is usually it's somebody at C-suite. CEO or chairman of the board, somebody right at the top says we need to try something else, and that's when they start coming to people like me. And then we start a conversation around, well, what is it that you want to do? And I ended up creating 8 programs because I could see that there were these sort of 8 common themes, and it was easier then for me to be able to say, how about I just leave this menu with you and then I'll come back and take your order and we can take a bit of one and a bit of another and maybe patch something together that's going to work. But it really does depend on what they want. But I find that by giving people choice and flexibility, it sort of feeds that, because it's beyond frightening to have share price be affected by what you're going to teach or what you're going to do. And it's also beyond frightening to think about there could be wholesale transformation required here, because there's a lot of impact and cost.
So some of the things that would stand out for an organisation, I can't attract the people I want to attract. And when I attract them, I don't retain them. And my reputation out there is not saying, this is where I want to work there.
Well, the reputation I find is really interesting, because a lot of them think they have a great reputation.
They may be out of touch.
And they think, I have a great brand. There's a lot of work that goes on around brand. When you're in these organisations, you buy into it. You want to do well and you desire to crawl to the top of the tree because everybody else is wanting that and you just want to get there so badly. And when you come out and you start looking around you, all of a sudden you realise there's a whole world outside, and sometimes there's far more interesting stuff going on in the grass than there is back in the big trees and in the forest. And people in the grass don't really mind. They're not interested whether your tree's got greener leaves than somebody else or it's bright and sparkling. And they're not interested in your brand. And so I think that there's got to be some shift at some stage around recognising, does our brand actually matter? And so we talk about disruption and are we going to get disrupted? I think disruption is just another label for, do I matter anymore? Or can someone carve me out? And so now we're seeing this flurry of protection running around. So innovation lab, investment in technology and all sorts of other things to try and prevent that. So here's where sport comes in as a really interesting example, because when I worked in a state sporting organisation as a volunteer board director, our question was, where are we going to be in 5 years? And we literally had to take a match and burn the house down.
So with that, I'm interested in the comparison in terms of attracting young people, because we see this across organisations, particularly the cultural activity organisations, that the catch-cry is we have to attract younger people. Why is my first question. And I don't get to how for a much longer period of time. I want to know why you think you have to do that. what is it that you think you're offering that they would want?
Yeah.
And who are they?
And I think so. We tend to brand everything with youth.
Yeah.
Innovation and youth go together, which is not necessarily true because we're three of us are sitting around a table and we're all innovators. It's easy to label innovation, but also the reality is youth are doing more interesting things.
In terms of their out of work activities, there's a whole lot of calls on their time. Did you in that organisation look to bring in younger people?
So this is the interesting thing, and so we're talking about the sport of dragon boating. There was so much pressure from the members we must have youth, where's all the young people, there's nobody coming through the ranks. We were seeing masses of people joining in the 50 plus age group, right? So we did start a schools program and we're getting a modicum of success there, but what happens is everybody then goes off and they work hard, they have houses, they travel, they have babies, and it's very hard and you're competing with every other sport because in that 20, sort of 18 right through to 40 age bracket, which is the sweet spot, you're in competition with every single sport out there, right? And life, and study, and everything else. So as a board, we looked at that and we looked at the effort to go into that and we thought, we're crazy because the money is in the 50 plus. These are all people who are retired. These are all the footballers with bad knees who can still get into a boat and paddle. And also we looked at our growth on the northern, so we covered the state of New South Wales, and if we actually look up north of the state where everyone was retiring, huge amount of growth there. And so the plan then became, whilst we absolutely will not stop the momentum in youth and in what we call the premier age bracket, which is the 18 to 40, we will not also over-invest in it because the reality is we just can't compete and our resources. But a lot of it came off risk and return. So like any business, if you sit there and you think, I'm flogging this to death. My resources could be spent over here where all these people are screaming out for a little bit of attention. So let's keep the school programs running. We'll keep investing in that. But let's just not worry as much. And the other thing is let's push it back down to the clubs. They're the ones that know their area. They have the capacity. All we have to do is provide the infrastructure so that they have the boats and they can get on the water and they have the policies and they have the governance and the support to run their club.
So using that same model, could you not go back to an organisation and say, this is how you do it? Identify, we don't always need young people, but there might be some projects, some teams, some areas who think that they do. So it's your job to try and find them, and find how you can get them and how you can keep them. Why will they stay?
Within the resources that you've got. This is tough because we've seen this in the superannuation industry. We've got a lot of old heads scratching themselves going, old people sitting there, I call myself old, but we're all sitting there going, how can we engage with young people? No one's interested in their super in their 20s. And they have spent a fortune, the industry funds and the big funds and even the mediocre funds, the middle funds, and they've created new funds. They've all reached out, member engagement, and they've all tried very, very hard to break it. And now you've got these young disruptors coming through that are basically very clever marketing people. There's not much behind it. And they're getting the traction.
I think it's a different way of thinking. When you were talking about the dragon boat and talking about young people and 50s and all of that, what I was really hearing is your stage in the life cycle, because the numbers really are outdated. There's many things written and stats about we are living 30 years longer than we did about 40 years ago, right? So the average age now, people living to 90 is very common, maybe even 100 plus. So instead of looking at how old young people, that young person, it's really what you said about the footballers who that's the right group, the right fit for this, because that's my target market, because that's what they want. And in that group, it's huge. And I think the old way of thinking was, my membership is dying out, I need to get new blood. It's nothing to do with age anymore.
No, just convert.
It is what is the right for this sport, for this project, for this company and keep changing it. So I think I won't be surprised if over time we won't be working for as a permanent employee. 90% of the workforce will be working for themselves and going on the project side, whether today I'm working for this company as part of making this happen tomorrow to you, and so
the freelance economy. And we see it already with freelancer out there. There's a number of websites, Expert 360 and others, and that's part of what I've done too. Is I sort of took this decision and thought I've got a unique opportunity here to go out and start my own business. And I'm also looking for, I might pick up a contract for 2 or 3 days a week or a short-term contract for a while and get myself re-educated. I was raised looking for the safety in permanent work, and if you don't have permanent work, then you could be in trouble. You might not be able to pay your bills, and we have to move that mindset because there is work out there, or there are other ways, and there's a whole heap of us in our mid to late 40s and over who, if you're not starting to disrupt yourself and get used to being very uncomfortable, then you could find yourself in exactly the position you most feared.
Yes.
I think organisations, should also be looking at how can we educate our people.
Well, organisations are in the same spot. They're not disrupting themselves. They will be.
They'll be left behind.
That's what we talk about. The dinosaurs will be off the cliff, won't they?
Right.
How many of them understand that within 10 years, half of the jobs will be done by a machine of some description?
Well, and they'll just change.
Different.
And which ones? And there is a lot of work that's done out there, and there's a lot of assessment being done about that. But the jobs that I did when I first came out of school, I was an accounting assistant, and I was manually typing things into an insurance back office general ledger. Well, that doesn't exist anymore.
No,
that's all automated. And then so I spent many years as a portfolio accountant, calculating the assets minus liabilities, balance sheet more or less of a portfolio. Well, that's all done by an algorithm.
Still doesn't give you skills, though, I have to say.
My
first job was folding men's shirts and putting them back into the cellophane box that they had. Now, I can still fold a man's shirt with 17 pins. I know exactly where they have to go.
I tell you what, I learned a lot. I used to work in a chicken shop after school, and I can cut a chook into 8 quarters like you wouldn't believe still.
Jokes aside, it's a very valid point, because when you talk about the shirt, somebody might be thinking, who folds shirts anymore, so what's that? I think that skill that you got from there, you're applying in your floral art world, and I think the skill that you learned from carving is applied somewhere else, and so we shouldn't dismiss any experience and expertise that we gained that's no longer required in that format, but utilise some other way.
It's very much the same with education as learning. I trained as an architect. Do I use that now? I don't work as an architect.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't. I build flowers.
Yes, and so I think some of that must come into it.
But it's not the focus of my work.
No,
and it actually hasn't ever been the focus of my work, apart from when I was studying.
This is what I love about what you were just talking about. This change up of, I may have trained in this for a while, and then I moved to something else, and I'm okay. I survived because there are people that do that seamlessly, and quite often I look at people that going to have a career change, and they go off and they do amazing things, and you think, wow, I did 26 years in financial services. It's sort of like at some point you think, when am I going to get off the train? For me, it was I moved into leadership and people management because that was my sweet spot, but I needed to go through a process of learning to find
it. You pick up the other things along the way, and I think that in that first pass of moving from the structure to the one that is a bit more self-determined, if you stay with the industry or the organisation that's comfortable, and then an opportunity arises that throws you completely somewhere else, and you think, well, why not? I'm ready now. And that's a nice transition, whereas the sort of close one door and open the next is very hard for some people. To feel that they are adequate. And our biggest issue, I think, as a race, is that we celebrate our weaknesses, our fallibilities, so much less than we celebrate our strengths.
Yeah.
Because we think that that's the appropriate thing to do, and it's not just a cultural thing in this country. I think it's a human thing. It's a human thing. I see it everywhere I go. You can still be humble and you can still be good at your job, but you need to recognise. I think you've got to have a list somewhere that you look at, even if it's first thing in the morning, that says this is the stuff I'm good at. Remember this today, and then you go off and do the day.
And it's okay to even know what you're not good at and own that as well.
Yeah. And decide if you want to do something about it or just I'm comfortable with that. Or look, you know what, it looks like it's impossible, but I'm going to try. And then it feels fantastic when you get something that you weren't good at and you prove to yourself that you can do it.
And it's little stuff. It's like, I really... Public admission, I detest using the phone. Always have. I love the electronic age because I can do everything by email and I'm really good at writing stuff down. But in the event where I have to, there's no alternative for me, but I have to use the phone, I will use it. And then when it's done, I think, I did that.
Good on me.
I'm so good. Pat me on the back. But I don't have to do it again for another 6 months. It's all good.
But the thing is, you can and you try and you're okay with it. And we're just not good at sort of saying, I'm not really good at this, but I'm going to try. And I think also we've got to get better at not judging people who do that.
Yes.
And that, again, I think that in organisations and leadership and management, you've got an obligation to your staff when they talk about stretching people. You've also got to provide a safety net that says if you fail,
it's okay.
I used to always say to my staff, here's the box, and you play around in there as much as you want, but step outside, and that's where I can't help you. I can't defend you, I can't save you, nor will I, because I've given you the box, and the box is pretty big. And we have that conversation. It sort of really does set a standard.
Yeah, you're talking about pushing the lines of regulatory, legal...
Or risk. We could talk about risk forever because we've become so risk adverse as opposed to being risk accepting. You think about in your personal life if you're knocking down a kitchen or something and you've got the sledgehammer there in the cupboard and you think, do I put the sledgehammer through the cupboard knowing there might be a water pipe behind it? How many times at home do you think I'll give it a go, right? I'll give it a go and I'll take the consequence because I'll have to ring the plumber. But we just don't apply the same mindset in a work environment.
We don't take the same responsibility
and
for the
we don't
decisions.
take the responsibility.
Yes. Time for us to take a break in this discussion. Join us again for part 3 of the discussion with Trish Nicklin. But for now, I'm Kim Bailey, she's Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec.